Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is for those people who are in a relationship where one of you is an Aries and one is a Sagittarian. And this can be any combination of sun or moon. I've included the moon because I think sometimes it can still give some of the same influences, albeit in a slightly different form, but, enough to really seem like it impacts the relationship that way. And so Aries is a sign that is, well, first of all, I should say, both of these signs are fire signs. So Aries is a cardinal fire sign and Sagittarius is a mutable fire sign. And I, I guess you would say, if I give out full disclosure, is that what you would call it? I am a sun in Sagittarius. So the reason I'm kind of half joking, but just in case it seems like I'm defending Sag versus Aries. But I will say that because these are both fire signs, they're considered to be trines. In other words, they form a favorable angle that means that they're 120 degrees apart. And so the point being that they're supposed to get along very well and they have a lot in common. And that certainly is true. But in my experience with dealing with Aries people, I haven't always been so gung-ho about, my interactions with them. So I think that we always have to look at things in real life and not just on paper or what they say in some book or online site, because it really is going to be about individuals. The reason I do these types of videos is because I still believe that there are going to be a lot of things where people go, yeah, that's kind of how we are. And it can work both ways. If you find that you're frustrated in a relationship and you're kind of like stuck, why do we always fight? Why are there so many issues? Then perhaps this can help to illustrate what's going on. So in any case, one of the main things that I think that both of these signs can give to one another is positivity. Fire signs are positive. Now, fire signs as well as air signs are masculine signs, and the masculine signs are positive and the feminine signs, the earth and water, are negative. And I have read, somewhere where they say, why do feminine signs have to be negative? Like saying that that's sexist. But think about batteries. Are batteries sexist? Because the negative is, do they say? I think they say female, right? They say female and male for electronics. The innies and outies, you know what I mean? So there's a reason why they say things like that. And, the positive sticks out. And so this is why positive signs are considered extroverts. But again, not every Aries and Sagittarius person is going to be an extroverted individual. There are other reasons for that. In general, though, we can generalize, and it's going to be generally true. And the reason that this is important is because we're talking about compatibility here. So when two people are positive, generally positive, maybe they have their off days, they're going to look at life with the glass half full. When a fire sign person is with somebody who is always complaining, is always like seeing things in a negative light, that can be very draining for a fire sign person. Maybe another sign, it wouldn't faze them whatsoever. They would maybe agree with that life view. But for a fire sign, it's very good to have somebody else who is on the same page with looking at life from a positive perspective, because fire signs are expansive. So they're always kind of looking ahead rather than wallowing in the past. They're always thinking that their best days are ahead, that there's always something, a new opportunity around the next bend. And that is actually good to have somebody who is thinking like you, who's on the same page like that. So if if you can identify with that, then for sure you're going to appreciate having somebody like you. Getting back, I didn't, I typed out some of these traits, but I didn't think about being an extrovert. And now that I think about it, I just want to touch upon that, because that likewise I think is very important, because if you have one person who is a homebody and they're introverted, they like to read, they don't like parties, and you have somebody who just loves parties, loves to go out, that's going to, be quite a glaring difference in these two individuals. And I'm not saying that it's totally impossible to ever make it work, but it's just like another strike against that couple. And this would be a perfect example of how it's not necessarily that anybody's the bad guy, that anybody's doing anything wrong. It's just that they are different. And this is why we have to stress this, because it's not to blame one person versus the other. Another thing about these two people is that they like to have fun. They're big kids at heart. I also put spontaneity, and I think that we can include that, as being very similar. And the reason that this is so important is, again, if one person is like, hey, let's, they're just sitting around, let's go and take a hike or something like that. The other person will be game. When you live in the moment, then you're willing to drop everything to do something. Now, one of the earth signs that Aries tends to attract is Capricorn, because Capricorn is a cardinal sign. So there's certain things that an Aries person will have in common with a Capricorn. And how this can play out is that an Aries person can find that the Capricorn individual is very serious about life. And even though Aries is very ambitious like Capricorn, Aries enjoys, it's kind of like work hard, play hard type of mentality. And, I think the Capricorn's mentality is work hard, work harder, or something like that. Capricorn people are not really interested in having fun. Now, I know that, luckily there might not be any Capricorn people listening to this, because they might flood my inbox with all kinds of complaints. Kind of like, going against what I say. And just to make it clear, those Capricorn individuals, they may have some inner planets in Sag, like Mars, and they may have certain elements to them that do like that can be more spontaneous or like to have fun. So, again, I am perfectly aware that I'm generalizing, but I don't really make any apologies for that, because we have to in order to be able to do these kinds of videos. So some of you may be thinking, well, that's just superficial. Okay, so you're big kids at heart, big deal. That's not really a big deal. Yes, it is. It's a very big deal, because, going back to this Capricorn example, or an Aries person who finds themselves with a Cancer individual, they can, as a relationship progresses, it can very clearly get to the point where the Aries person is being treated like a child, because of these tendencies of living in the moment, for instance, not thinking ahead, maybe not planning ahead. And even like Aries is very financially free spending. And that can really irk a sign. Actually, I should be saving this for the Aries Capricorn, but I'm trying to kind of contrast it with Sag. So both of these people are going to live in the moment, and they're not going to worry about what tomorrow brings. And if you're with somebody that does worry about that, that's going to cramp the Aries person's style. And that's going to lead to resentment. So I will say that we have to, take it seriously, because it can create a lot of friction at some point after the initial euphoria of the new relationship wears off. Another thing that these two will share is being adventurous, and I don't think I combined that with spontaneous, but being adventurous is a big deal too, because some people are more chill, that they're more like they're not really. I could have put active too, because I think especially Aries can even be hyperactive, but I think that being game for something new. Aries is all about doing new things, novelty, and Sag is flexible enough and curious enough to do it as well. Some people are not. Some people are very content to going to work, coming home, watching television, wash, rinse, repeat. I don't think that Aries people are going to tolerate that type of relationship. Eventually, it's going to wear thin, and a Sag person is much more willing to challenge the Aries person to do fun things, and that could include traveling. Sagittarius rules the 9th house of travel, so this can be quite fun for these two people to go to new places that they've never been before, just things like that. It can just be very expansive, being fire energy. And that brings me to being passionate, okay? And the way I see it is that fire signs, being expansive, do not want to play small in life, and I could have also put ambitious, but I'll just mention that. But that kind of reminded me of ambition. But being passionate means that you take life seriously enough that you want it to be meaningful, and you want your experiences. You want to frame them as being larger than life. You don't want to play small. You don't want to live small. And even if you are minimalists, some people, they love to travel long distances, but they have very little luggage. They just travel light, and they just have all these adventures. To me, being passionate is not treating life like we're just going through the motions, that we're just getting up and working, eating, sleeping, and doing it over again. We're not on automatic. We're kind of we're very engaged. And like I said, the fire signs are big kids, and if you think about children, they are always enthusiastic. Yeah, that you could say passionate, enthusiastic. Some people are very matter of fact. They're not really that interested in. They don't have many interests. They're just kind of existing, and that is not going to work for an Aries person or a Sag. But I mean, I'm kind of focusing more on the Aries in this particular series. That's not going to work for them. So Sag and Aries are on the same page with that approach to life. Another thing is that these are two independent people. Now, what I put down is that this can work both ways, that this can be a positive as well as a challenging situation. It's positive because when you're independent, it means that you're not relying on your partner to be the end all be all, in your life. You may have separate interests. You may have separate friends that you see on your own. You're not codependent. You don't have to do everything together. The other person is going to give you your space. Fire signs tend to really need freedom. So they don't want a suffocating partner. Yes, I'm talking about Cancer. Yes, I'm talking about perhaps like a Pisces person. Not so much suffocating with Pisces, but dependent on the Aries person. And I'll get to that when I do that video. Or even like a Libra. Even though Libra is an air sign and they're compatible, the Libra person may really want to be with the Aries person a lot of the time. But, the perfect way to boil down what the conflict can be between Aries and Libra is look at which houses they rule. Aries rules the first house of the self, and Libra rules the house of committed partnerships. So in some cases, these are opposing signs, but we could call them complementary signs, which makes them seem more compatible, which they can very well be if they integrate. But when there are just too many differences, they're going to be two different extremes. So again, independence can work that way, where the two people are so independent that they are not spending enough time together, or they're I would say especially like they want to do what they want to do, and they're like, if that other person doesn't want to go to the movie that I want to see, I'm going to go alone. I'm thinking of me and my partner both being Sagittarians. That can happen too. But if you do that too much, then you get to the point where it can actually be a situation where you never do anything together, or very rarely, and then you can drift apart because of that. So, for instance, going on independent vacations, that can be very awesome. And the other person, if they're not that possessive, they're not that, threatened by your desire for freedom, that's really cool. But if it becomes this constant thing, the chances are that eventually one or both people will decide to just call it quits, because they'll realize that they really don't have a lot of things to glue them together. They're just living almost like separate lives at some point. Another thing I wrote down, and I wrote LOL, I wrote two big egos. And I wrote LOL because I think that fire signs do have big egos, and it's not that serious. I'm not talking about full-blown narcissism. I'm just talking about having a sense of self, maybe sometimes being self-absorbed and, doing your own thing, so to speak. When you have two people who are doing this, it becomes more emphasized, and suffice it to say, it can be a situation where there's clashing going on. Again, who's the head honcho? Maybe you could even say power struggles in a certain sense. But definitely the two people wanting to, I guess you could say more like a power struggle. And these are things that can be worked out in many cases if there's enough to keep these people together. But in some cases, if there's arrogance, if they're, that kind of thing, then that will poison a relationship. And a similar theme is having a bit of a temper. fire signs can get heated up. And Aries, I haven't talked about, I always kind of pick on Moon in Aries because that can be a very volatile emotionally. Sag Moon, not so much, but definitely things can get heated. It's just that Aries has the additional situation of being connected to Mars. So there's this this impatience that kind of boils over, and with the Aries sun, but especially the moon in Aries, the person can lose it very quickly, but regain their composure just as quickly, and totally not hold on to their anger. I don't think either of these signs holds on to anger, although if either one of them has the moon in Scorpio with the sun in either Aries or Sag, that could complicate matters for sure. And there might be that tendency to hold on to grudges and to have a more complicated emotional nature. And be less forthcoming emotionally, because Scorpio can be quite, hidden in that sense. So, one thing I have to say though is that even if the Aries person is volatile, the Sag person, unless they have the moon in Libra, which can be very distressing to them to see displays of anger, they can tend to be more live and let live, and it doesn't really faze them when Aries has their hissy fit, because they're just used to it. And of course Leo can also have quite the hissy fit. I think out of the three fire signs, Sag is the least likely to do that. But I'm sure some of you who are Aries, who have been with a Sag person, you might have your own stories to tell. But I'm just thinking about myself. It's not that I can't, get furious, mad, but it's going to be with somebody very close to me, not just anybody. And I could totally see an Aries or a Leo person pitching a fit, with customer service or something, and just being like very hot-headed in that sense. And then the last thing I want to say that can be a negative trait with these two people coming together is irresponsibility. Now, I hadn't written it down or typed it out, but when I started talking about the money situation, then it reminded me of that being one of the things that could happen. And this is because both of these signs are living in the moment. And so maybe both being free spending and not having a budget, and then blowing out their budget, and having issues on that front, and maybe just forgetting to pay their bills and doing stuff like that. Just because they are not planning ahead, they're just kind of enjoying things. They're taking life as it comes. And because you have two of these people with the same tendencies, unless one person has a lot of earth and they tend to be much more grounded than the other person, that can lead to enhancing the weaknesses. If you have a balance where one person is more responsible about those kinds of things, then the other person can benefit from that, because that other person could say, hey, did you, pay your cell phone bill, or yada yada, and stuff like that. And that's not necessarily a deal breaker. Sometimes there can almost be like this camaraderie about two people, kind of almost like a bonding that comes from, both having these tendencies of being rather irresponsible with money, because so many other people would totally judge them, and they've met somebody who totally gets them in that sense because they're in the same boat. So again, it's all about the attitude that you bring into a situation. If you really feel like emotionally like that person is for you, then even if you have some of these challenging things going on, you can still make it work. And that's the important thing. So I hope that you enjoyed this. And if you would like me to look at your relationship, if I have a love reading, that's a relationship reading, you can check out all my offerings at rainandmoonastrology.com. The link is below to my ordering page, and thank you for listening. Take care. Bye.